negotiation, experience, maybe performance reviews. But that's not really how it works anymore. In most modern companies, your salary is not individually set in the way you think it is. It is pre-structured, pre-bounded, and algorithmically constrained long before you ever sit down at a negotiation table. And once you understand how this system actually works, you start to see something uncomfortable. You are not negotiating your salary. You are negotiating within a range that was already decided for you. Let's start with something simple. Imagine you apply for a job. You think the process looks like this. You impress them. They like you. They offer you money. You negotiate. You land somewhere in the middle. That's the story we're told, or so you're told. But inside most mid-size and large organizations, the actual system looks more like this. The role is assigned a compensation band before the job is even posted. That band is determined by internal salary compression rules, market benchmarking data, equity, alignment constraints, budget forecasting models, geographic compensation tables, historical internal pay structures. By the time you enter the conversation, the decision has already been narrowed to something like, this role pays between 120 and 145. We are not going above that. Ever. You are not negotiating salary. You are negotiating positioning within a predefined statistical range. Now here's where things get more interesting. Those ranges are not even truly human-made anymore in many organizations. They are increasingly generated or heavily influenced by compensation benchmarking systems. There are entire data industries built around this. Companies like Radford, Mercer, and others collect massive datasets across industries, titles, levels, geography, company size, industry segment. Then they output what looks like neutral data. Market rate for a senior associate in X city is Y. But what that really becomes is something far more powerful, a self-reinforcing pricing system for human labor. Because once enough companies use the same datasets, the market rate stops being descriptive. It becomes prescriptive. It stops saying what people are paid. It starts dictating what people can be paid. And here's the key shift most people miss. This system doesn't just cap salaries upward. It also compresses them inward. Let's say two employees are doing similar roles. One is slightly better, one is average. In a purely performance-based system, you'd expect wide divergence over time. But in reality, most corporate compensation systems resist wide divergence. Why? Because companies optimize for internal fairness, perception, retention, risk management, budget predictability, pay equity compliance. So instead of letting salaries spread out organically, companies use range controls, meaning high performers get pushed toward the top of their band, low performers get pushed toward the bottom, but almost nobody leaves the band. This creates something subtle but powerful, a flattening effect on compensation variance. You are not being paid for your true marginal output. You are being paid for your position within a structured hierarchy that is intentionally stabilized. Now let's talk about how you actually move within this system. Because yes, there is movement, but it is constrained. In most large organizations, salary increases come from three sources: annual merit increases, promotions, level changes, market adjustments, re-leveling roles. Each of these is governed by internal logic systems that are often far more rigid than employees realize. Let's take merit increases first. Most companies allocate a fixed pool. For example, a company might decide total salary increase budget this year is 3.5% across the entire division. That immediately creates a zero-sum internal economy. If someone gets 6%, someone else is getting 1%. Even if performance differences are large, the distribution is constrained by budgetary mechanics. So your raise is not just about your performance. It is about your relative positioning inside a fixed pool. Now, promotions. Promotions feel like the most meritocratic mechanism. But even here, you run into structural constraints. Because most companies do not promote into open-ended compensation. They promote into a higher band with its own ceiling and floor. So even when you move up, you are still moving inside a predefined lattice. And often, promotion timing is controlled by headcount planning cycles. Level mapping is standardized across departments. HR calibrates promotions to avoid inflation of job levels, meaning promotions are not just earned. They are scheduled and regulated. Now, here's where the system gets more algorithmic than most people realize. Large organizations increasingly use internal compensation tools that function like software-driven constraint engines. These systems flag employees below minimum band thresholds, employees above maximum compression limits, pay disparities relative to peers, market deviation thresholds, and they push managers toward adjustments that maintain alignment. This creates a feedback loop. Even if a manager wants to give you a large raise, the system often forces justification, approvals, or overrides. So what looks like managerial discretion is often just bounded optionality inside a rules engine. Now, zoom out. What is the purpose of all of this? It is not primarily to suppress wages in an intentional conspiratorial sense. It is something more structural. Companies are trying to solve four competing problems at once: attract talent, retain talent, control cost, maintain internal fairness perception, and these goals are in tension with each other. So instead of optimizing for one, they build systems that stabilize all four simultaneously. The result is a compensation architecture that behaves like a controlled system rather than a free market. Now let's introduce the most important hidden layer: external market anchoring. Even if your company has internal bands, those bands are not created in isolation. They are anchored to external market data. That means your salary is influenced by other companies in your industry, regional compensation surveys, talent scarcity, indices, inflation adjustments, venture funding cycles in tech-heavy sectors. So your pay is not just internal. It is a reflection of a constantly updated external dataset that no individual employee can see in full, which creates a strange asymmetry. You are negotiating blind. The company is negotiating with full market visibility. And this leads to one of the most important realizations in modern labor markets. You are not priced individually. You are priced as a category. Not you as a person, but mid-level associate in X practice area, software engineer level 2 in Y region, marketing manager in Z industry band. Once you are categorized, your compensation becomes statistically derived rather than individually determined. Now we need to address something critical. People often assume negotiation can override this system. And sometimes it can, but only at the margins. Negotiation is most powerful at three moments: entry point, initial offer, promotion transitions, external job switches. Outside of those moments, your leverage is significantly reduced. Why? Because internal compensation systems are designed to resist large deviations within stable employment relationships, which creates a paradox. The system is most flexible when you are least attached, and most rigid when you are already inside. Now let's talk about why this system persists. Because from a purely rational standpoint, you might think, why not just let everyone negotiate freely? The answer is that uncontrolled compensation systems create instability. Without structure, companies face pay inequity disputes, retention chaos, internal resentment, budget unpredictability, legal exposure. So the algorithmic structure is not accidental. It is a response to complexity. It is a control system designed to make labor pricing predictable at scale. But there is a psychological consequence to all of this, and it is subtle. People begin to internalize their compensation band as identity. They stop asking, "What is my output worth?" and start asking, "What level am I?" That shift is profound. Because once your identity is mapped to a level structure, your perceived earning potential becomes psychologically capped. Even when external opportunities exist, internal anchors remain. This is known in behavioral economics as anchoring bias applied to identity systems. Now step back for a moment. What we are really describing is not just compensation policy. It is a layered system consisting of external labor markets, internal banding architectures, budget allocation algorithms, performance, calibration systems, managerial constraint, layers, psychological anchoring effects, and all of it converges into a single outcome. Your salary is not a single decision. It is the output of a multi-layered optimization system. So where does that leave you? It leaves you with a very specific strategic insight. If you want to increase your compensation meaningfully, you are not optimizing within one system. You are navigating across systems, which is why the biggest salary jumps almost always come from changing companies, changing industries, recategorizing your role, moving into higher leverage markets, not incremental internal negotiation alone. Because internal systems are designed for stability. External transitions are where repricing happens. And that leads to the final idea. The most important factor in your salary is not how well you negotiate within a band. It is what band you are in. And that band is determined by industry structure, company type, geographic market role classification, perceived scarcity of your skill set. In other words, your compensation is less about negotiation and more about positioning. So when people say, you should just negotiate harder, that advice is incomplete because it assumes a flexible system, when in reality you are operating inside a structured pricing architecture that only flexes at specific points. And once you understand that, your strategy changes. You stop thinking like someone asking for more and start thinking like someone deciding where the pricing system applies to them in the first place. That is the real algorithm behind your salary. Not a single decision maker, not a single formula, but a distributed system of constraints, benchmarks, and feedback loops that quietly determines what you are worth in the labor market at any given moment. And the more clearly you understand that system, the more strategically you can move inside it. Not by fighting the algorithm, but by learning where it breaks and where it resets you at a higher level.